And we are recording on Monday, April 15th, 2024 at 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time with the one and only Dr. Robert Malone, who is rocking an absolutely badass, I believe, leather jacket of sorts and becoming more and more so the most interesting man in the world. But guys, if you go into the description, you can go find Dr. Malone. You'll find his Twitter, his Gab, his Getter, the link to his Substack, and I believe to the series of videos you're doing with the Epoch Times. But I wanted to talk about my mom had sent me an article about a month ago about a vaccine that either just rolled out or had been rolled out, and it's just not being talked about called Sequivity. And the long and short of it is it's mRNA vaccines in cattle. That's about the extent of what I know. But I know it is something that people are still interested in because it seems like just that phrase at all, just mRNA, has kind of been bursting onto the scene for the last 4 years and seemingly not stopping. So, Dr. Malone, please introduce yourself for the new listeners and take it in any direction you'd like.
So I quickly looked up sequivity to make sure that I was oriented. And let's start off with this is not a cattle vaccine.
Okay.
So so we've kind of misbranded the episode a tiny bit.
All right.
But vaccines in cattle is something that I talk about, and it is a concern in terms of the genetic vaccine strategy. So it's totally valid to talk about that. But Sequivity is the trade name for the Merck custom vaccine for swine. And so what does that mean? Let's unpack that. One of the reasons why uh, pharma and in particular Moderna are so pumped about mRNA vaccines is that the technology lends itself to customized vaccines. In that, you have a standardized manufacturing process and whatever in terms of making the RNA and the formulation. What it means is that a manufacturer can key in a new sequence and protein coding sequence. So this is RNA or DNA sequence. It's saying the same thing, and that can be rapidly manufactured and purified and formulated and released as a product. So the cycle time for release of a product is much shorter than it would be for a monoclonal antibody product or a standard protein product that has to be manufactured, purified, characterized, et cetera. So that's one of the reasons why pharma is so pumped about this, is that it lends itself to personalized custom vaccines. So what is sequivity? How does that relate to the article that your mom sent you? And just to give credit where credit's due, we wrote a Substack about this, and Jill was the one that did the most of the writing and the primary research on it. I think it's approaching 2 years ago. It was the first one that really came out that I'm aware of from the, let's say, the resistance or whatever you want to call it, the alternative media, talking about mRNA vaccines in livestock. And she covered sequivity in that article. I don't think she had the trade name, but it was known at the time that Merck was doing this. So what is this product? What it is that Merck, remember, just to reel it back, chicken farming and pork farming lend themselves, so swine, lend themselves to a factory farm business model where you have these intensive, close quarter covered housing for the livestock animal. And in contrast, cattle don't really lend themselves to that. In the last stage of fattening, they'll go to a feedlot. But for the most part, cattle have to be raised on large pastures of grass. As you know, we're all familiar with the beef cattle, typically black or red, perhaps with white face, that we see when we're traveling through much of the country, except the places that Bill Gates has already bought up,
Yeah,
or are sequestered in the 30 by 30 initiative by Joe Biden. But that's a separate topic. We can cover that some other day.
we can go down
Uh,
that rabbit hole. I
so
don't care.
so um, so beef don't lend themselves to this really intensive factory farming. Pork and chicken does. And one of the problems of intensive factory farming in particular is infectious disease. Because when you have all those animals that are genetically very similar, by the way, all packed into one small chicken barn or a swine barn, then you have a problem that if you get a infectious agent into that, then suddenly you can lose your flock, lose your swine herd, or have productivity equals how much meat do you get per pound of feed, and over what period of time, have your productivity crash because the animals are fighting off some infectious disease. In those infectious diseases tend to be either viral or bacterial. And in the case of chickens, it's almost exclusively viral. Viral infectious disease is also a major concern in the swine and pork industry. So, so what's a producer to do? Well, you can vaccinate against the usual nasties that you might expect for your particular species. In the case of chickens, the margin, the profit margin is so tight on chicken that rather than vaccinate, they typically will just come in and kill the entire flock. And they may fumigate the barn. And the chicken industry is structured in such a way that the producers, Purdue or whomever, have managed to put the almost all of the risk onto the small farmer. So the poor soul that has the loan out for those huge chicken barns that you may or may not be familiar with, but if you drive around in the South, you certainly are. Those huge, long chicken barns in which you have thousands and thousands and thousands of chickens all packed into one chicken barn. That local farmer is typically a big loan out that may be bankrolled by Purdue or whomever it is that they're growing the chicken for. And they're stuck in a position where the producer basically gives them the flock or sells them the flock. You're required to buy that flock. You're required to buy the feed from that producer, et cetera. So you find yourself in a position where it's almost indentured servitude. You're working for the man when you're running a chicken barn, and to a large extent, that's also true with pork. So what that translates to is that the customer for the likes of Merck and Sequivity is not some local Midwestern farmer, but rather big ag, because they control the entire industry and all the financing and the food and everything else. So Merck, if you're big ag, what you're afraid of is that some virus establishes itself, or bacteria, but particularly in the case of Sequivity, they're targeting viruses, and that pathogen may evolve within that particular swine herd or that chicken barn. So you may end up with a pathogen circulating that is not well matched to the currently available vaccines, the traditional vaccines. So along comes Merck and they say, oh, we're going to produce custom vaccines. So the way that they're going to do that, and they are doing it, and it's now marketed, and almost, there was no fanfare with this. The the end user customer, the person buying a pork chop at their local grocery store, has no way of knowing whether or not that pork received a RNA-based product or any other vaccine product. It's not labeled. There's no obligation to label whether or not that pork chop came from an animal that was vaccinated or not vaccinated. Matter of fact, there's a lot of challenge even saying whether or not that pork chop came from the United States or someplace else. That's the cool rules. And the United States lost that case, by the way, in the international court, having to do with NAFTA. So Merck comes along and they will sample animals from your swine barn and identify what viral flora they have, identify which, by sequencing, identify which of those are potential threat or risk to reducing your productivity. And then they'll build a customized mRNA vaccine for those viruses that are circulating in your barn or in your operation. And then your vet will receive a bottle. And if you do the web search for Sequivity, Sequivity, you'll see a picture of this big bottle that has the formulated mRNA. And by the way, Merck does not use pseudouridine. So remember, pseudouridine is what the Nobel Prize was given for, because somehow that was enabling, and that's just bullshit. And if you want an example of that to prove the point, Merck doesn't use it in their pork mRNA vaccines that they produce in bulk. So this is what Sequivity is all about. And then they go through, I don't know if they use needle injection or jet injectors. One of the problems with jet injection in bulk, so you can typically take one of these bottles and stick it on a jet injector, and you just go through the barn and go all up in the same bottle. The problem with that is that you get some blowback, you get some spray back when you do the injection. And so, for instance, in humans, this is a major problem with transmission of hepatitis B. That's why we can't do bulk jet injection anymore like they did for smallpox back in the day. In my age cohort, that was how they did it. You don't have a smallpox vaccine, I suspect.
I don't think so.
Yeah, unless you were particularly fearful of monkeypox, but we won't go there. I don't think you're in a high-risk group.
No, I don't
so in any case, that's typical in veterinary, is they will use a jet injector, but that creates a risk that of transmission of infectious agents, bloodborne infectious agents from one animal to another. So they may use needles. I don't know. The problem with needles is, of course, they're needles, and they need to be disposed of, and that creates a sharps problem. And there's a whole cascade, and not only that, a cost problem, et cetera, because particularly, with these high volume operations, they're sensitive down to the penny. And like I said, particularly with chickens. So that's the quickie on Sequivity. It's a customized mRNA vaccine made without pseudouridine by Merck Corporation, customized for individual swine operations. And I'm sure they give a bulk price to whoever the pork producer is. Remember that the meat industry has been highly consolidated, with the possible exception of cattle to some extent. And the federal government seems to be on a rip to try to shut down small slaughterhouses. There's only about half a dozen big slaughterhouses in the United States that are associated, for instance, with feedlots, and they control the entire market. And a lot of those are actually foreign owned. There's a major beef producer in Brazil that controls a lot of the global market, and they're corrupt as the day is long, notoriously so. But what's going on in this sector, the whole meat sector, and you'll recall there's a push to try to get us all off of meat and onto bugs or synthetic meat or whatever, right? But what's been done is a great example of regulatory capture, where USDA in its inspection processes have created a greater and greater burden for compliance that the slaughterhouses or abattoirs have to comply with. And this comes at a cost. And furthermore, you have to now, if you're going to advertise as a USDA inspected facility, and you pretty much have to be USDA inspected, you're really required to have a USDA inspector on site. And of course, the only facilities that can afford to do that are the great big shops. Now there's just been, as of this March 24th, I think it was, another wrinkle added to the story. The EPA is getting into the game, and they have implemented new regs for the slaughterhouses based on the Clean Water Act, which is only supposed to apply to navigable waterways. But they did a lot of monitoring for a few years looking for infectious agent risk associated with these smaller slaughterhouses. And the only thing they could find as a risk, this is the EPA, was nitrogen and phosphorus waste, which most of us considered that to be a fertilizer. But when you have blood and offal and other material coming off of a slaughter operation, basically the elements of life are carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. That pretty much we're all made out of those five things. And so no surprise that when you have meat byproduct in blood, going into a wastewater pond or a well or whatever, if you're a small operation, you have a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus. But like I said, for most of us farmers, we buy at great expense nitrogen and phosphorus in the form of pelletized fertilizer to put on our fields, if we're not putting old manure on our fields. So, but this is considered to be a climate change issue somehow. And although virtually none of these slaughterhouses are discharging into navigable waterways, the EPA has kind of extended the Clean Water Act to apply to any water sources, including groundwater. And so now they've kind of swept up these small slaughterhouses in this new reg that you have to implement mitigation for nitrogen and phosphorus waste. And what they want, here's a little bit of a mind bender. The technology that they want to have implemented to get rid of the waste, the animal waste that has so rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, is not to turn it into fertilizer, which, bone meal would be a classic example of that, that many people put on their gardens. But rather, they want it, I think the term is gasified, we might call it burned. And what that does is it releases methane and CO2. The two, and methane in particular, is one of the most potent greenhouse gases, but that doesn't matter, which seems, and by the way, the cost of these systems for the small slaughterhouse that's necessary to support you being able to buy beef from your local producer is in the range of, at a minimum, $400,000 and typically about $1 million. Plus, then there's an annual operating cost. So basically, it's going to put the smalls out of business and force everybody still more to these very large producers, which are consolidating the entire industry of meat production in the United States. So that's the kind of the nature of what's going on. These guys play hardball. This is full on, lobbying, regulatory capture, all the things that we've come to expect from our federal government these days in spades, and jamming up the small business guy. So then let's talk about RNA vaccines in cattle, which is your title, and absolutely, there is a push to develop and deploy RNA vaccines for cattle because there's a sense in the industry, pharmaceutical industry, including, remember, veterinary pharmaceuticals are a huge market. And it's fairly consolidated. There's not many producers in that space. So, it's the usual players, Merck and Pfizer, GSK. They all have their corresponding animal vaccine divisions. In some cases, they're renamed, but that's the way that the industry's rolled. And so just as they see there's a gold rush for human mRNA vaccines, there's a gold rush for veterinary RNA vaccines. And they absolutely want to convert and deploy mRNA vaccines for cattle. And that's causing a lot of consternation in states that have a significant cattle industry, and particularly in the small producers that tend to be more libertarian anyhow, and particularly in cattle. So I've been called to consult with a few legislators, and there's legislatures that are trying to put forward laws about this to control or stop it. And so far, they're being blocked by industry. And the legislation that's come out so far, in my mind, has been a little naive and typically overstated. So it doesn't help us if it doesn't help the cause if you have legislators listening to the fringes that are making wild, unsupported statements about the risks associated with this tech. Not to say there aren't risks, but people that are, making the kind of "we're all going to die" comments, that's easily refuted by the industry. And so if a legislature puts that kind of language into a bill, then the industry can easily refute that, knock it down, and get it voted out. So all you do when you make these outrageous statements is you basically play into the hand of the very people that you're trying to oppose, and delegitimizing yourself with the middle of the road folk. So my advice has been, in those states that have dairy industry, because it's clear that these products can be shed in breast milk, that you've got a really strong case that these should not be deployed. This tech is not appropriate to be deployed into dairy herds. That's the most clear cut of all. And then if you talk about meat production, beef in cattle, then you're up against the question of whether the products persist for some period of time. Are they going to persist through the slaughter? Are they going to persist through aging? Because what we eat is aged beef. That's why they hang the carcasses for a period of time. are these mRNA-based vaccines that include pseudouridine with the risks associated with that, which include immunosuppression and longevity and lack of degradation. So there's all of that complexity that largely is not answered because what the USDA is not really disclosing their regulatory correspondence. It's even worse than the FDA in terms of openness and transparency. And the producers have gone to ground for the most part, the vaccine producers, and they're doing everything they can to stay below the radar. And they're certainly not publishing papers and advertising the nature of their product when their human partners won't even share the components of the vaccine for humans.
Mm.
So that's kind of where that stands. Now there's a new thing on the horizon that I think there's already one approved in Japan, but this is the kind of the hot. It's billed as the hot new tech, which is self-amplifying RNA. And it's actually not new. Peter Lillystrom has been working on this since the early 90s at the Karolinska, as have others. My first postdoc came from his lab and continues to work in self-amplifying RNA. That's Peter Berglund. And has had some recent advances. So what is self-amplifying RNA and why do they care? So what this is a technology that involves a single-stranded RNA virus, typically an alpha virus. Alpha viruses cause human disease, typically as encephalitis. So they infect the brain and meninges. So you can take an alpha virus and genetically modify it so that it becomes essentially infectious RNA, so that you can produce the RNA and inject it, and those cells that take it up, whether it's formulated as naked or with positively charged fats, as lipid nanoparticles, the cells that take it up then don't just produce the protein like spike, like the human vaccines that we're familiar with now, but rather those RNAs produce a replicase, a protein that causes the RNAs to replicate themselves and then produce protein. So they produce both their polymerase, which is a natural viral protein, and any other things necessary for them to replicate that they can't get from the cell. And then they also have a payload that produces whatever the antigen is. So you end up with needing to dose much less, but then the cells that take it up produce much more of the RNA because it basically grows in the cells. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
And so there's a number of issues with this. Number one, what happens if it gets in the brain? Can you get encephalitis? What are those risks? What are other risks associated with this polymerase? And can the infectious RNA, which is essentially a defective virus, be rescued by other viruses? Did that make sense what I just said? So
Mm-hmm.
if you get infected with another virus, superinfection, in the same cell that you have the self-replicating RNA, can that self-replicating RNA then get packaged into the virus that infected the cell, or we call these defective interfering particles, and then, coughed onto somebody else, et cetera. And then, of course, there's all the issues of shedding. A highly infectious self-replicating RNA. That tech is really being hyped right now. The other thing that's being hyped is Moderna's recent studies involving customized vaccines for cancer. And the Moderna stock price has popped. It's coming off a low baseline because it was in the freezer because nobody's getting COVID shots anymore. So it's coming off a low baseline, but it's popped, I don't know, sixfold or something like that on the basis of news that they put out recently of a collaboration with Merck, in which, in this case, head and neck cancer patients, so this is typically squamous cell carcinoma in smokers or tobacco snuff users or whatever. So squamous cell carcinoma, the head and neck, which is a nasty disease. It just eats away your tissue and it's just ugly. Eats away bone. Uh, um, so the Merck has a product which basically blocks the PD-1 receptor on your lymphocytes, so it blocks the ability of your lymphocytes to not recognize your own cells. In other words, not react. So you basically enable somebody with this product to generate a rip-roaring autoimmune disease, which has been shown to be very, very beneficial against melanoma and head and neck cancer. And so what Moderna is doing in these new studies, and they don't actually compare to a control of the Merck drug alone, they compare to untreated. They've shown that if you take, I think it's called Keytruda, this Merck drug, the PD-1 receptor blocker, together with a customized mRNA vaccine that produces 32 different epitopes, so short proteins. Then they're seeing clinical responses in a set of 22 patients that have received both the Merck drug and the Moderna customized vaccine. And so on the basis of this, all they say is they're encouraging results, that kind of stuff. They don't give any data, but it's got Wall Street all tied up in a twist. And what it really demonstrates, as far as I'm concerned, is it's another verification that the tech supports customized vaccines. So they basically biopsy the tumors of the patient and do genomic analysis on those tumors. And then they use artificial intelligence to compare those genomes to the normal genome from the patient. And then the AI picks out what it thinks are the most important tumor antigens that are novel or mutated compared to the normal, and then directs their machinery to manufacture RNA that codes for these 32 optimized tumor antigens. And then they formulate that and inject it to the patient together with Keytruda. So it's kind of similar to the Merck swine vaccine concept that we were just talking about, in that it's, you're sampling an animal genetically and then building a customized vaccine product for that animal or that swine herd. And you're able to do it in a cost or, relatively efficient timeline so that you can still vaccinate the patient before they've died of their head and neck cancer or their melanoma. And hopefully cause that patient's immune system to recognize those tumor cells more effectively. So that's kind of where the tech is right now. I just did a episode of Fallout on that that should be airing fairly soon. No, actually, sorry. We covered it this last Friday in our first live stream. So it's already live, and you can watch a replay of that Ask Me Anything episode that we did where we covered those things. So that's this kind of the state of the art right now. We don't have cattle mRNA vaccines yet. There's some cattle diseases that I could imagine they might want to pursue. There's a bovine infectious diarrhea, for example. It's a viral diarrhea. There's some other bovine viral diseases, but it's not clear that you really need the mRNA tech and that you can't deal with those using a more traditional vaccine approach. But time will tell. They're absolutely, Wall Street is enthralled with this technology. The World Economic Forum is enthralled with it. And I think part of the reason is because it is, or as was stated by the CEO of Bayer Pharmaceuticals recently, the deployment of this technology in the face of COVID, for example, has overcome the public's resistance to gene therapy. People in the face of the fear that was promoted, people have accepted this tech, and willingly so, and eagerly so in many cases, under the false pretense that it's keeps you from getting COVID disease. But they were willing to line up and get the genetic jabs. And so now they're in a position where they can't really say, and legislators can't really say, well, we're opposed to human beings becoming GMOs. Basically, all of Europe and most of the West has already become GMOs. So that argument is going to be a lot harder to prosecute. So Tommy, that's what I can say about that. I think I've kind of run through my update for where things stand in terms of animal health vaccines that involve this mRNA tech. And I find it particularly intriguing that Merck is not buying into the UPenn patent that is used by Pfizer and Moderna. I guess also of relevance is that UPenn, which is sitting on a mountain of cash because of getting royalties on all this stuff from Pfizer and Moderna, they're bragging that they're developing mRNA vaccines for every possible indication, including all the classic gene therapy applications. So this kind of puts the lie to this isn't gene therapy technology because the university that received the Nobel Prize is all in, you could say, going whole hog on, yes, thank you for smiling, yeah, red flag on the field on that one.
Yeah.
That's
I have sticky notes. I make a note and I go strike one. All right. Keep my hand on the power plug.
we call that a dad joke. So
Yeah. And it's allowed. Past a certain
okay.
age, it's allowed. Younger,
Okay.
you'd be screwed. It would be.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're good. You're good right now.
Okay. So I get it. So they're all in on developing every possible product they can imagine. And they seem to be funneling this money into certain labs at UPenn to pursue every single thing they can think of, including every vaccine they can think of and all the gene therapy applications. Because, of course, if they get a hit, then they can get what's called a derivative or subsidiary patent or dependent patent, which will further extend the patent life of their core intellectual property.
And could you what you brought up earlier? Because I believe I saw you actually post about it on Getter. It might have been last week or whenever you did, about the 30 by 30, the Biden. I don't even know
Right.
what it is. I just recognize
Okay,
the title.
so 30 by 30, catchy little phrase. What that translates to is by 2030, the Biden administration, and in particular, this was advocated by then Senator Kamala Harris and the woman who's currently head of the USDA, who was a senator at the time. It was a minority. It was a bill floated that got almost no support. But as soon as the Biden administration came in and Harris was appointed and that other senator was appointed to head of USDA, then suddenly it became the Biden administration policy that by 2030, 30% of the land in the United States would be protected and essentially rewilded. So that's 30 by 2030, 30% by 2030. And this is all supported by a report from the Center for American Progress, which is run by John Podesta and funded by George Soros. And it's based on the thesis that, I forget, they're losing a football field worth of land to development every minute or second. I forget what the number is. But when you calculate it out, that amounts to 11 million acres by 2030. And the amount of land they're talking about sequestering under this 30 by 30 initiative is vastly more than that. It's the equivalent of the land mass of 4 states of Nebraska is what they want to protect. And they want it to be highly productive lands, and they want it to be rewilded. So not only protected, but kind of off use for humans, and allowed to return to a fully wild state. That's the goal, and this is explicitly part of Agenda 2030, which is considered to be a treaty signed by Mr. Obama. That's the treaty that also guarantees that it is a fundamental human right to migrate to live wherever you want. So that's the basis for the open border policies. The legal basis and political basis. So this Agenda 2030 seeks to have at least 30% of all the land, arable land, and highly productive lands worldwide so sequestered by 2030, and has an eventual target of 50% of all the land worldwide to be placed into natural reserves that are off limit from human use.
50% worldwide.
Right. See, when you appreciate that, you can swallow that one, process that for a moment. Then suddenly 15-minute cities start to make a lot more sense. They want to sequester land into real wilded areas. They absolutely want to reduce human population. And they want to basically put us all on reserves, or you might say slums or ghettos, urban ghettos, but 15-minute cities where we'll all live in high density, so that we're not impacting on the rights of other species. And all this also feeds into the One Health Initiative, which is the kind of the basis for the new UN pandemic or WHO pandemic treaty and the international health regulations. That's all wrapped up in One Health, which is to say that the health of all species are equivalent. So there's no longer to be a bias towards preserving human health. We have to have policies that will respect and promote the health of all species, plant, animal, etc. I guess bacterial and viral probably, if you're going to go there. So that's where this is driving. There's a group that's really done a great job in alerting. So let me take a step back. How are they going to achieve this? One of the ways they're seeking to achieve it, this 30 by 30 initiative, is through conservation easements. So they're basically offering private landowners a little bit of money if they sign up for a conservation easement. And then once they do that, then the federal government has significant rights in controlling how that land is managed. Okay, so this is kind of a incremental deployment of the strategy in which they're basically purchasing. You can almost think of it as akin to mineral rights from private landowners, but it's conservation rights that they can then exercise at some point in time. And those that operate on leased grazing land, et cetera, which is much of the West for cattle farming, understand what this means. You will have the federal government as your business partner, whether you like it or not, and they can change the rules pretty much whenever they want to. So that's kind of the core of the 30 by 30 initiative. There is no statutory authorization for this. Congress has not approved it. It's entirely an executive action and backed by significant dollars. So the only people that are alerted to this are, in many cases, local county land offices and commissioners. And the folks that are advancing this agenda that I quote extensively in that Substack are that are resisting it, I should say, and are trying to alert people about it, testifying in Congress and on the Hill, and did American Thought Leaders on Epic about it, et cetera. They're working more at the local level with these county commissioners, and there's a growing number of counties that have opted out of this 30 by 30 initiative, particularly in the Western states, often kind of is a cluster of them that goes right along the Rockies on both sides. The resistance is also fairly big in Texas and growing because a lot of the emphasis has been on the Western states. All of this has another subtext which involves capturing water rights because that's the huge issue out west in terms of land use. And of course, once they're placed into conservation, then you can't be using them for cattle grazing or any of these other uses that are claimed to be destructive, but the data actually show that the private landowner is much better at protecting and conserving the land than the federal government is. And this relates to things like clearing underbrush, periodic burns, et cetera. The government tends to think that conservation means not doing anything. And that actually results in a worse outcome than actively managing the land, which, for instance, is what the American Indians used to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all wrapped up in the belief that the bureaucracy knows best for all of us, and we should just follow along and do what we're told. And they're the ones that really understand how to manage land and conservation. And farmers and ranchers generally don't agree with that assessment, but that's the belief system. Like I said, when we led talking about the EPA stepping into this.
Doesn't it seem like, if you just took like a broad glance at it, doesn't it kind of seem like the slow seizure of prime land for the
It does.
for the hyper
Absolutely.
elite?
Yeah, and the slow seizure of and degradation of our fundamental rights,
Hmm.
slow incremental implementation of uh, corporatism. Uh,
Seizing of water.
yeah, authoritarianism, totalitarianism. That's where all this seems to be going, is a kind of an incremental uh, techno totalitarian society that's being implemented to benefit large corporations.
And yeah, just if you removed borders, removed the language, removed anything, you just observed it as just an impartial observer. Yeah, it seems like seizure of the best land, the most beautiful land, the cleanest and healthiest land, and then access to food and water. Well, the rest of us are sequestered in, call it 15-minute cities, call it urban areas. It's just they'll start massive, but slowly shrinking over probably a decade or two, ghettos for the unwashed masses. And I would imagine just looking 30 years down the road, you would then slowly start as they get their land, as they have their wars, and soon it won't be that 30 by 30 is enough, right? You're gonna have to have 40 by 40, 50, whatever it is. Just keep steamrolling it just little bit by little bit. That, and as robotics and AI matured even more, it would be easier and easier to start removing the useless eaters until eventually, who knows by when, 2050, 2060, you'll have your primo land. They'll kill off the people that helped implement it, because the first thing good commies do is put the revolutionaries against the wall. So the people who are doing their part will get betrayed. And I would imagine you'd have like the hyper 0.001% will all have sprawling estates, tens of thousands of acres, their own mountain ranges, robotics and AI to live like true gods. And the rest of us will be, not all of us, they'll want some of us for experiments and whatever they do. Probably throw a handful of us at different planets.
and
But
and manual.
yeah, and they will slowly but surely, without firing a shot, without any one massive day, take over and establish their own, what they
That
think,
seems to be
utopia.
the trend line.
Yeah.
Tommy, I ran into something the other day that kind of made me stop for a minute. Apparently, the orders for the big airliners have all dried up.
That's good.
They're not going to be making the big haulers anymore. They're going to be making fast, um, basically supersonic smalls, um, for long distance travel, uh, um, at super speeds, for those that can afford it. And the rest of us of course, because of climate change and CO2,
Yeah.
uh, we're no longer going to have the option to travel distance.
Mm. Yeah. These are all eerie things. These are all canaries that are kind of dropping dead. It's like, all right, well, one day, if you could see we're like 50 years ago, someone who said this, you'd be like, yeah, maybe one day, but get over it. We're getting far enough along that they're starting to, yeah, you're starting to see, you know, the DEFCON 1 signs. It's like if you started only getting, I don't know, presidential, I guess, speeches like from a bunker. You stopped seeing like Bill Gates or Elon Musk. You just started, every time you saw them, they were in front of some nondescript concrete wall. You'd be like, what's going on? And you'd be like, things are kind of it's like right before a snowstorm. Like I'm up here in Maine, go to the grocery, you can always tell everyone's there. And then right when it starts to snow, you'll realize there's no one on the roads. And you can feel it. No, it's a snowstorm, but it's like that times a trillion. You just see like the little markers going, and you're like, what's happening?
That's why I'm building my own little paradise here
Yeah.
in Virginia, and building raised garden beds and getting tractor implements, etc. Is and trying to build that self-sufficiency. uh, I don't think they're going to be able to deploy a 30 by 30 or 50 by 50 kind of agenda as effectively here on the Eastern Seaboard
Mm,
as they can in many of the flyover states, the Midwestern states, and the mountain states.
mm,
Uh, I think it's going to be a harder lift for them, but and I'm so I'll just say that I think that uh, now is the time to think hard about uh, self-sufficiency, building that skill set, getting those tools, and trying to get yourself a little slice of land
mm-hmm.
to make your stand. The other day, Tommy, I my wife Jill has been really opposed to us having guns here on the property. She had her nephew committed suicide with a rifle, and she had to clean it up
Mm,
afterwards, and that had a big impact on her.
sure.
And uh, she had another family friend that committed suicide with a gun. Um, uh, Friday, no, Saturday, uh, we spent the day training with handguns.
Yeah.
Popped off 600 rounds. Uh, um, a little bit of tactical training, mostly marksmanship. But we're zeroing in on decisions about weaponry here on the farm. I
Yeah.
think you all, as far as I'm concerned, a hammer is a tool. And as the Beatles eloquently pointed out, Maxwell with his silver hammer can uh, commit murder, and certainly people can use handguns or long guns,
Mm-hmm.
but they're just a tool, same as my hammer, my saw, and but they're a tool for a specific purpose. And by the way, it can also be used to put down an animal that's been badly injured.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so we're here on the farm. We're committed to the second, and we're going to get the hardware in and get the proper gun safe and all that kind of stuff. Uh, and in preparing for that training session on Saturday, I got the task. I drew the short straw to get the ammo for everybody, and good luck doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was doing a drug run
Yep.
and transporting illicit goods. Fortunately, I found a gun shop here that's just up the road that also has a shooting range and carries bulk. And I was able to get the rounds that we needed. Uh, but I at Walmart, uh, they say they still sell handgun ammunition, but they don't. And they made me feel like I was a dirty criminal for even asking about it. And Dick's Sporting Goods has completely gotten rid of their guns and ammo. Uh, I guess the people that played basketball and ping pong didn't like to see the guns in the corner. Uh, and it was a very odd experience, very eye-opening experience for me, just running around trying to get cartridges on short notice. Um, it put me in touch with a reality that I've heard about a little bit, but there's nothing quite like experiencing it directly
Mm-hmm.
uh, to open your eyes.
Yeah. It's I owned a gun in college, and that's how I lost my brother. So I sold mine back in 2015. But last fall, I went and purchased a high capacity handgun. Um, just because primarily crazy stalkers on the podcast, but also, I'm now that I'm up in New England, I'm only a couple hours from family who are all mountain people. And, I always make sure I have enough gas in my car. And I always make sure, and I'm not sponsored by them. I wish I was. Phoenix Ammunition, Fenix. You can order any amount of ammunition. I went to stores, couldn't find any, went there, ordered like 300 rounds. It was delivered in like 4 days. It's great. And but yeah, no, I did that, and yeah, make sure I have gas in my car. And it's one of those weird as like a city boy. it is like a weird kind of realization to have. But, it's like when the Titanic starts leaning. You can have that sort of panicked moment where you realize, oh, it is leaning. And then eventually you have to take a big breath and be like, all right, this sucks, but it's what it is. And the world, you can only be as good as the world allows you to. And when you see the increasing steps that the powers that be, not even US, just in general, what they're doing and what their plans are for us, you can freak out. I think everyone's allotted an allowance to freak out. You can have that moment or day or month. Okay. And then it's what Alan Watts, the philosopher, used to say. There's really only one question in life, and it's whether or not to commit suicide. And if the answer is no, well, then you can go down every other flow chart of what you want to do with your life and blah, blah, blah. So if you're choosing to live and you're choosing to stay in this world, it doesn't matter if you don't like guns, other people do. And that's all you need to know. And yeah, I mean, I feel weird. Even through the podcast, I've got to go shooting with, Delta Force guys. So maybe I have a little bit of a bias experience. I'm like, oh no, it's cool. You can pick it up in no time. It's like people pay like $10,000 an hour to shoot with them. And I got to shoot with them because they came on the podcast. But like, no, I was opposed to them forever, just personally didn't want to own one, but eventually I did. And there's really doesn't matter if you like it. It doesn't matter if you think it's cool or doesn't matter if you sign off on the 30 by 30 plan or whatever that it doesn't matter at all. Someone else is. So you have to. And it's just what it is.
And it's just a tool.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
they're not animated. They don't jump off the table and go start shooting people.
Nope.
In our training, it was really emphasized, don't pull that trigger if you're confronting another human being.
Unless you're
If
ready
you
to kill
have
them.
any other options, if you have
Yeah.
any other options, and if you pull that trigger, when you do it, you have to be conscious that you are placing yourself at high risk for jail,
Mm-hmm.
prosecution, jail, even if you're a cop,
Mm-hmm.
prosecution, jail, um, loss of all that you hold dear, your income, your whatever assets you have, you can lose all that, and you should do anything that you
Sure.
can other than pull that trigger, um, unless you think that losing all of that is worth pulling that trigger. So it really puts the focus. Our instructor made the point, well, um, let's imagine there's a pool of sharks there and great whites. Are you willing to jump into that pool of sharks? No. Well, let's imagine that your child fell into that pool. Are you willing to jump into that pool of sharks? Well, yes. Imagine that your gold watch fell into that pool of sharks. Are you willing to jump in there? Well, hell no.
Mm.
Okay. And that's kind of
Yeah.
the way she explained it. That's how you got to think about this world.
Mm.
Is if you can retreat, if you can avoid, you should do so unless you feel that your person or your life is at significant risk,
Mm.
or that of a loved one, and then you've got a hard, bloody decision to make.
Mm.
But we live in a world in which that's thank God I'm not in that position now, and I hope I will never be. But given the way things are going, I think it would be naive
Mm.
to not prepare for a worst case scenario.
Sure. Yeah, you have to it comes down, I guess, like, the flow chart of if there's really no other opportunity or no other option, then yeah, you have to use a firearm. And it's, what if I go to jail? What if I get arrested? What if I'm in prison for the rest of my life? Those are all things that can only happen if you're still alive. And
Yes.
so you have to decide, is this what I'm doing?
Yep.
Is this the direction I'm going? And it's what it is. It's not, I have a lot of complaints about general reality, food
Yeah.
and water scarcity and, you know, cultural resources and war and slavery. There's, I have a pretty long grief list with the general reality I find myself in, but it's also the one I find myself in. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why you're here. I don't think you know why you're here, but we happen to be mostly hairless bipedal organisms that need food, water, and shelter. It's just what it is. And
And we
walk
have to do our best. Yeah.
you have to do your best to survive. And there isn't a moment of we're not in world peace right now. And it's just what it is. And I don't like it. I don't personally enjoy it, but it's where I am. And it's kind of what you have to do. And I'm gonna text you an article that I think you should read. It's about an AI system called Lavender that's being used by the IDF right now. And I'm not making a statement about IDF. I don't care. It's just what the IDF is using right now to target Hamas members for air sorties. And it's made by Palantir, which is a U.S.
Okay.
Defense contractor. Not even the fact of what it's being used for, but just in general, the fact that that system is being used to make decisions. I think you should read it. And for everyone listening, I'll put it in the comments as well. If that's what's declassified and that's being used right now, you have to imagine that there's something 1,000 times crazier is not being used just for defense, but for all sorts of things. And you wonder, are these everything that's happening, the 30 by 30, how much of this is a brilliant tactician and how much of it is just being spit out by a computer right now? Because you have these like whistleblowers from Unit 8200, which is Israel's NSA, and they're going like, yeah, we don't even know why it made this decision. The machine just prints out the piece of paper and says, this guy is on this block. You need to take him out today. And you just have to trust that it's like, yeah, I guess so. Like we have like, why? It seems like he's a nobody. It's like it doesn't matter, fire up the
This
jets.
yeah. So this gets towards pre-crime.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's
Minority Report.
yeah. Oh yeah. And that's for war. That's like pretty basic, kill the person that you want killed.
But
What mach
we just had the Pfizer court laws reenacted by a single vote
Yeah.
after heavy lobbying from the Biden administration.
Yeah. So what machine somewhere is spitting out like you need 30% of US land by 2030? Like, shut up, don't question it. You gotta buy it. You have to buy it. It's just you have to put mRNA in the cattle. Why? Shut up, you have to do it. It's priority one. Like that's what it's probably like that at the very top. Probably have a couple of generals going, yeah, we don't know why this. I more and more so I'm imagining that it's not the Bill Hicks-esque where you get elected president and a bunch of industrials bring you in a room and show you an angle of this Zapruder film you've never seen before and then say any questions. Now, more and more so, I think it's a couple of generals take you into a room and they go, so we don't know what's happening. And the supercomputer's been running it since like 98, since Clinton was in office, and it's been self-improving and it doesn't listen to us. But for the most part, we're all still here and alive. So we just take orders from this. Your job is to go out there and smile and kiss a baby. You go, what? And they go, yeah, Obama, Bush, Trump, none of them had any control. It's all, and we don't have control either. But only like three people know that. So go out and put on a good face. And you come out and you go, hey, we're excited about trans rights in Palestine or something. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not in charge. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's, I think it's probably something like that. But yeah, of course, only here can we start with cattle vaccines and end up with the super AI that's running the world. So, with that, Dr. Malone, I say we wrap this one up and thank you for your time. And guys, please go in the description. Please go follow his Twitter, Substack, all that good stuff. Dr. Malone, thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Tommy, and I hope you have a great day. And
Thank
get
you,
a
sir.
chance to
Thank you
dinner.
very much. All right, guys, please go check him out. Please go follow him. Please give him some